I'm Ruth.
I'm Ray. We go together like Beyonce and Jay.
No, Ray, we're
I don't know
nothing
what's
like
wrong
them.
with that. Tell me what's wrong with that.
We're nothing like
But
them.
they're ride or die like us, right?
You
That's
know what?
all.
I'm not that ride or die. I am
Fine.
not.
She's a Latina.
He's a gringo. I'm into culture and food and...
And I'm zero.
Why would you say that?
I'm
do not
always
want
saying
zero
I'm into
on
boring
our
documentary
podcast.
stuff.
Oh
And
my
like
God.
you're into like cool stuff. Why do people want to listen to this? It's because we're different.
We go together like how and why?
But somehow it just works.
What are you guys doing?
Go back to bed, Pablo. We're just recording our podcast.
Everybody has a podcast.
Everybody has a podcast.
With Ruth
And Ray.
Welcome back to Everybody Has a Podcast. So, Ray, I wanted to ask you something. I wanted to ask you if you think that anybody listens to our 1 minute and 30-second intro song. I was thinking about this the other day. Is it just too much?
I think it's people's favorite thing about. I think it's what hooks them. Like they hear the opening and they're like, "Oh, that's cute," and then they just end up listening further to us, and then they like our banter, and then they end up deciding the guest might be worth it, and before you know it, they're at the end of the episode. What do you think?
I think it's really funny there that our intro is like 1 minute and 30 seconds. I think that's so awesome and hilarious. It's like what a lack of freaking self-awareness we have. We're like anything for our art, even if it's just a podcast. It's like I find myself always hard to self-edit. And I was listening to our podcast the other day, as we do when we edit a piece. And I thought to myself, is anyone super turned off by this jingle? Or are they like, oh, that's adorable? Or are they like, it's adorable, but it's way too long? And anyway, I just got into this really funny rabbit hole of personal thought about our intro. So
Well,
I
you
thought
know
I'd
how
mention it.
podcasts work. Everybody knows where the commercial breaks are in their favorite podcast, and they know exactly how many clicks forward to get to the part where it picks back up with the stuff that they want. I have a feeling anyone who's annoyed by the opening just starts our episodes and hits click twice, and
For sure. But you know how there's that one moment where you kind of forget things that you definitely should know or already know. And so I just think maybe there's some people out there who literally 2 seconds in are just this stupid intro. If they only got rid of the intro and they're just pressing fast forward with animosity. I don't know. It's just a funny random thought in my head.
So our special guest today is former Missouri State Senator
Wait a
Maria
minute.
Chappelle.
No, we can't. That is not a transition. What are you doing here? No.
I wasn't convinced that any of that. You think any of that's going to make it in?
Yeah.
All that's making it in?
Not all of it, but some of it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I think this episode's dropping Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
And in that, which is a week before, we're going to find out if we somehow ended up actually winning the NAACP Image Award this year for Outstanding Podcast. And all right, here's how this went. When we were finishing After the Uprising Season 2, John Duffy, the co-creator, goes, hey, if we somehow get nominated again for the Image Award, we're all flying out there. We're all going to party and go to the awards. And none of us actually thought it would happen. And then lo and behold, we actually get nominated. We found out a few weeks ago, right? For the Image Awards. And nobody really has the money right now to fly out to the Image Awards. And then what falls into my lap is my first shoot in LA in several years, really, 2 years. And it just happens to be the exact week of the Image Awards. So I'm going to be going.
I feel like
You're
it's
staying
destined.
here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would love to
I would have loved you to be my date.
Me too. And I would have loved to take Pablo because I don't know, whenever I think about Pablo living somewhere, I always think of him being a coastal person, living near water. I feel like he'd make a perfect California kid.
I'm sick of everything, and I feel like going and spending my latter years out in sunny SoCal would be very nice. And watching Pablo grow up near, yeah, the ocean would be cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's like it's impossible everywhere though is the thing. Like I know the cost of living's terrible and there's climate change issues, so I don't know. Are we all supposed to stay in the middle of the country?
I think at this point we have to have the same mentality for all of the major like desirable cities in the US as we have of New York City, which is that is it worth it to live there? Yes, but will you have like very little to no money to enjoy like 50% of the city because you're basically priced out? Yes. You know what I mean? Like I think it's all the same at this point. Like back in the day, it was like, oh, how can you go live in New York? It's so expensive. Why not here, here, and there? And now I can't think of any city I really want to live in that isn't just as expensive as New York at the end of the day.
But at least if you're in LA as opposed to New York, you're not crammed into an island. Like when you're like
True.
living in poverty in parts of Queens or the Bronx, let's say,
Sure.
and you're just like stuffed into like you know what I'm saying? You're just stuffed into this little spot in your poverty. At least when you're kind of let's say you're poor in LA, like you can still go hiking.
You can
You can still do
still
a backyard barbecue.
you can still enjoy an aloe vera growing in your basement apartment.
I mean, if you can swing the parking costs, you can go swim in that ocean,
You can enjoy sunshine.
That's all I'm saying.
I know, I know. I get it.
So anyway, so our guest today is first time Image Award nominee, former Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal, who listeners of After the Uprising will know is my co-host for season 2, co-producer, co-writer, co-reporter, co-host, and she was psyched when we the night we found out, the night we got the email from the awards, like we called each other and just spent like 10 minutes just going, oh my god, it's just like
I mean, it's so amazing. It's such a great, yeah, it's a great honor to be nominated. It really is it is true what they say. Like it is an honor to be
well,
nominated.
the Webbies are trying to get us to submit. They messaged, they're like extending their deadline for
Oh
because we're
yeah.
associated with iHeart. They were like, hey, iHeart
Hmm.
associated podcast, you can still get in. And
Honestly, I think you should submit.
I know, but
Go for it.
you know how much some of these awards cost to submit to?
What's
The
this
Webbies in
one?
particular,
Is it 5?
450
Yeah, I
bucks.
figured. Ugh, inflation. I remember when it was 300. That's crazy.
And then like you never know, like do we go for series, crime and justice, or do we go for individual episode like the 10th one when we solved the murder of Darren Seals? Like what's
Mm,
the move? People who have more cash, they like submit in multiple categories. Best writing, best host for Maria, maybe, stuff like that. But the reason people can be interested in Maria, even if you haven't listened to After the Uprising, is like if any of you have thought in recent times with the politics the way they are, like, you know what, I never saw myself running for office, but like, I think I need to run because you know what I mean? Like, there's so many bad people getting in, like,
yeah.
maybe I should do this. This will be kind of an inspirational one for you. She grew up in like St. Louis County. And then I think, what did we establish? Her late 20s, she runs, I think it was 2004, and she wins. So I believe she ran out her term limits as a state representative.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she ran out those term limits, she was like, well, let's flip it to the state Senate. And she ran out those term limits. And then she served like one more term, I believe, in a different district, again back in the House of Reps. And that's when
Yes.
we met her right as she was finishing out her term at the end of season 1 of After the Uprising. We're like, hey, can you help us get to the prosecutor Wesley Bell and get a meeting for Melissa McKinnon, the mother of Danye Jones.
Mm-hmm. And she's such a great example of grassroots efforts, I think, because she told us, she was somewhat politically involved at some point. She would organize with the community and her neighborhood and things like that. But let's face it, she didn't have like a bank or sponsors backing her up. So she really did start like grassroots style, which is pretty cool. It's a story of a young woman who decided to give herself a chance, like a huge chance, and I find it really impressive.
Yeah, and when the movement for Black Lives started in 2014 out of St. Louis after the death of Mike Brown, like she was representing that district, so suddenly she finds herself, in a position to basically be speaking on behalf of this public that's kind of like erupting.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been interesting, and she talks a lot about that. And then when Trump gets elected, she had, and you hear me try to get her to talk about it during the interview, but she never talks about it as far as I can tell. But I called it, when you hear me refer to her Kathy Griffin moment during the interview,
Oh
that's me
yeah,
referencing that she tweeted at one point,
yeah.
uh, wishing for the death of a certain prominent politician that we all can't stop hearing the name of forever and ever. And at the time, and she got censored for it. Well, we all have our secret opinions about the thing that she said, and that's just how that's going to stay. So, anyway.
Anyway,
So, yeah, listen to
yeah.
her interview. So, she's an inspiring person, and she's like out to get, she is like on the trail. She's launching a new show, and so you'll hear her talk about that, but she's like on the trail of Wesley Bell, who despite our best efforts, continues to just come onto our radar every season. The prosecutor and continue and keeps exposing what appears to be like corruption and ineptness that we just can't like look away from. And now he is the U.S. Congressman from Missouri as of January 2025, and so
Oh
she
my
she is on
goodness.
the hunt for that guy, and you'll hear kind of like the latest on her and her efforts, and she's just an amazing, interesting person. So, I mean, what's really interesting with Bell is he only decided to run. There was like a tape leaked, but basically APAC, right? The
Mm-hmm.
what is it, like the Jewish lobbyist group or whatever? They said they would just drop tons of money in his campaign if he would try to take on Cori Bush and knock her out
Oh
because
yeah.
she was pro Palestine.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
they calculated it, and he got 18 million
Wow.
18 million from this group to like influence the Missouri election, and he won,
That's
and he
fucked
knocked
up.
Cori out. So
Do we know what he did with this money? See, I want to hear the podcast already. I'm already invested. I already have
there you go.
questions. Yeah, I'm in. I really am all in. I mean, the reason why a lot of these, well, not why a lot, the reason why the subject matters murders that you have investigated slash solved didn't get resolved is because he didn't do his job. So I think he's the perfect person to do a third and possible final season for now of After the Uprising. And I really think that also this is your new opportunity to um explore things that are happening now in the Black community during this administration, don't you think? I mean, it's almost like you could follow a story live. Where are things going? Are we heading back towards another peak into Black Lives Matter Part 2?
Well, we heard from our friends at iHeart, and it sounds like they want to see a deck on what season 3 would be before they'll take the meetings. So that's at least quasi promising. So the deck is in the works. So who knows? Who knows? All right, we've made it through like a year of episodes. You have many brands, Ruth, but more than anything else, you've really like flown the flag of a foodie, and in particular, like vegetarian foodie in many ways throughout your different facets of your career. And I'm annoyed that nobody is getting the benefits of this on your own podcast on our show.
I know.
Well, the other day you picked up a couple Jimmy John sandwiches for us. And
Because we
you
were
were
sick
bragging to me
and
about, isn't this the most delicious Jimmy John sandwich you've ever had? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, I know how to order Jimmy John's. And that is you in a nutshell. And it's really hard. Like, maybe you'll someday come up with your recipe book, and people are always asking you, like, when are you going to do your recipes? And, but like, I really think your specialty are like high end foodie vegetarian hacks for like otherwise common, things that people don't know there would be a hack for.
let me tell you my basic recipe for Jimmy John's as a veganish vegetarian, and then let me tell you like my secret at home additions. Like I'm insane, I'm psycho. So like yes, you're right. I do have like a God, what would you even call it? Like a personal recipe for every restaurant? It's like
Yeah.
some sort of menu. All right, so
Like every restaurant I found out at some point has their like secret order, like if you drop
yeah,
certain names of things, right? And
yeah.
you've got your own secret order for every restaurant.
Yes, I totally do. So, okay, so for my Jimmy John's sandwich, I like just a normal size, which is still very nice and big. I love it. It's very filling. By the way, I do wish that they had the option to toast their bread. Like that's the one thing Subway has that Jimmy John's doesn't. The OG comes, it's actually really simple, right? It's like cucumber, lettuce, tomato, mayo, and cheese and avocado spread. That's like the OG Jimmy John's recipe, I believe. Okay, so I get the veggie sandwich with no cheese and no avocado spread. Because I am kind of a food snob, I really hate their avocado spread. Like,
Yeah.
I really hate the texture. I hate the way it tastes. I hate it. So I always ask, no avocado spread. I wish they had fresh avocados. That would be a game changer, I think. And they could always, like, charge more money. So whatever. Why they don't have it, I don't know. I guess just practicality. I add extra veggies, so extra lettuce, extra tomato, extra cucumber, and then the additional stuff that I add to it that I think makes it the magic, like the magical sandwich that we enjoy so much from there, is that I then add pickles. If you like pickles, if you know, you know. I add
The
pickles.
pickles are missing from their original recipe.
I love my sandwiches with pickles or my subs. So I add pickles, I add oil and vinegar, salt and pepper, and mustard. So it's just like double stacked on veggies, plus I actually add seasoning to it. And I think people always forget to season things.
Yeah.
And especially tomatoes, like seasoned tomatoes. Just there's a huge difference between a tomato that has salt and a tomato that doesn't. So like
Mm.
then add mustard, oil and vinegar. You're basically making a salad dressing because that's what it takes to make a salad dressing.
Hmm.
Plus the vinegar like zestiness of the cucumber of the pickle juice. So like yeah, suddenly you just basically have a salad sandwich, which is like delicious and juicy. And the mustard you can add regular or whatever. And every once in a while when I get in a kick, I'll also get like the Jimmy John's peppers, like the yellow peppers because they're really fun. But yeah, that's the recipe right there. I think it's perfect. It's so good. I literally call it my salad sandwich because whenever I just want to get like the feeling of being hydrated through food, but I also need a carb, I feel like it's a really, really good sandwich. And it doesn't leave me feeling gross. And usually I split that sandwich into two and have like a half at like, let's say, if I'm having it for dinner at 6 and then the other half at 7. So it just kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it just goes. And if I if I'm feeling extra ambitious and I have the ingredients, I will take the sandwich home and I will pull out my jalapenos in vinegar and I will add sliced jalapenos with a little bit of the jalapeno vinegar juice.
Mm.
And it is so good. And if you're feeling crazy and you have potato chips, you do it sandwich potato chip style and you do a few bites with like, some regular Lay's or whatever barbecue chip or whatever in there, and it's so delightful.
So I'm gonna make Ruth do more of these over future episodes where it's like Ruth's secret recipes at like places where you can get your food. And like if you're used to just taking whatever is the famous available recipe at a particular restaurant, I think you're gonna get hooked on Ruth's approach where like you even bring an outside item that they don't have and you add it to it and you switch this and you pull that out and I'm telling you, she's going to take what you already thought was a good thing, like a Big Mac, only she's vegetarian, so not that. And she's going to make it just this like incredible thing.
Thanks, babe. Hey, you know what? I have some unsolicited advice wrap ups for Jimmy John's. This is how I would make Jimmy John's like elite for vegans and vegetarians. So first of all, I would add the possibility of toasting or panini pressing. I think that's a game changer because they have the perfect bread for it and the kind of perfect recipes for it. A lot of them are almost like Slim Jim style sandwiches versus a Jersey Mike sandwich, which is like enormous and almost like Philadelphia stacked style, and can barely shut it closed. So I would love a panini, a press or a toaster option. I think that would be amazing. And then also they have a contract with Hellman's mayonnaise. If you walk into any Jimmy John's, you'll see like a row of Hellman's, and I think they should get on the vegan Hellman's train, and they should advertise to people who just don't want to have regular mayonnaise for whatever reason. And Hellman's makes an excellent vegan mayo, by the way. It's actually my favorite vegan mayo, and I like my mayo. So that would be cool. Or a vegan another company, but I'm sure, I mean, Hellman's already has it. You already have a contract. Just go all in, right? The other thing the other thing that would make it awesome, and that already makes your sandwich vegan, right? Like if you order it the way I do without the cheese and then with the vegan mayo, boom, like you can still have your avocado spread if you want. I also would say get rid of the spread. It is gross. It is ugh, like I don't know how you eat it, right? I don't know how you not notice how gross it is. Maybe it's because I'm Mexican, so I find it as a personal attack on my soul. But it's way too it's actually overly citrusy as the problem. It just tastes like acid to me. It's like too acidic. It over acidifies everything, so I hate it. So anyhow, so get rid of that. Replace it with just good old avocado. Charge more for it if you want, whatever, but make it available. And maybe add a fun vegan protein, right? Like get a deal with God, there's that other really good company that I've loved forever that makes like the fake turkey, like blackened turkey slices. Oh, Tofurkey, the company makes really good um turkey style blackened turkey sandwich slices. So like something like that, right? So you still keep it in the fun sandwich family. So I just think that if these businesses were smarter, they would cater to more vegetarians and vegans because we are so loyal with our money and we always need it in a pinch. And places like Jimmy John's are like morally corrupt for sure. We already know this, but like in a pinch when you're traveling, when you have like restricted dietary needs, whatever, sometimes that goes beyond your moral of the day. And so I just don't understand why not more franchises and fast food places don't have more accessibility to vegans and vegetarians. I just really don't. They're literally losing money in my opinion. Although I guess they've done the math and maybe vegan products are too expensive to keep or something. So
Although the
anyway.
weirdest, although the one place I would think should not even be attempting to appeal to vegetarians or vegans is White Castle, and they're the ones who got the like the veggie slider. I'm like, who do you think you're gonna bring in?
No,
You know?
the one who can go vegan or vegetarian, I guess, would be Arby's because they're like, we got the meats. Although they do like a new commercial where they're like, we got the non-meat meats. I want to do that voiceover. We got the non-meat meats. I can't do it.
Wow.
I do like their curly fries. Excellent curly fries.
Oh, I always them and rallies.
For real. Yeah. So that's my food rant, I guess. I fucking love talking about food. I have a sickness. I'm looking for a food companion if anyone's looking.
Jimmy John's, if you're listening, she's giving unsolicited advice. You can just steal it. She just put it out there. You can just take it,
I
and
mean,
that's that. So do everyone a favor.
what else is going
Well,
on?
it's Valentine's. What are we doing for Valentine's Day?
Wow, you sound really mopey and sad about it. You're like, well, it's Valentine's Day, Kermit.
We both
I'm
have a little cold.
li-
Sorry for a little low energy, and I'm a little nasally today. But well, Valentine's has never been my favorite. So
I know it's never been your favorite. So why has it never been your favorite? Because
you don't have to
you're
do
such
that.
a romantic.
Ruth told me beforehand that we always like unearth a little more of my backstory, and I want to skip it this time.
No,
You know
I
what? I
don't
don't
want
like
to.
Valentine's Day. I don't even want
No,
to talk about my Valentine curse. Let's talk about. Here's what I want to talk about.
no, I
We've been
really
waiting a
want to
year.
talk about your Valentine's curse. I'm really serious because you're such a romantic, and I just love like it to know you is to know that you really do love and romance. Like it's something that I find very intriguing about you because, as you know, I'm very awkward about romance, and you just always shove it in my face in little ways, and it makes me. I'm still not used to it, like 15 years later, and I still don't know how to like acknowledge romance. I obviously I have issues, right?
Fourth grade. It's 1991, and
1991.
I have a crush on Carrie Toller, so I give everyone else the regular size Valentine, but I give Carrie the extra big Valentine. Well, before I passed them all out,
Wait,
the
by
girl in the
Valentine, you
seat,
mean like the card? Like the Valentine's
yeah,
Day
yeah,
card? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I got her the big one, so it would sort of send a little bit of a
Oh,
message, right?
of
But
course.
before they even get passed out, the girl in front, seated in front of me, Kelly Plasters, she
Oh,
notices
Kelly. Where is
that
she
I have
now?
one. Only Carrie's Valentine is the big one. So when she notices this, she tells me, and then she runs over to Carrie to tell her.
Mm.
So, in this weird kind of fourth grade logic, in a panic to get back at her, I tear up my Valentine to Kelly Plasters. I figure I'm not giving you a Valentine now, so I tear it up. So when she finds out that I tore up her Valentine, which is from me that I haven't even given her yet, uh, she runs up to the teacher and tells her, and I ended up having to write my name in the book.
The book. Oh
Yeah, I
my
ended up with a badge
God.
and column. So cut to a year
Wow.
later, fifth grade, 1992. By this time, I'm on to a new girl, Sarah Velikan, a much better girl than Carrie Toller. And the day before Valentine's, I ask her if she will be my boyfriend. And she says very
Your
clearly,
your girlfriend. You said
and
boyfriend.
I ask her the day before Valentine's, right before the end of school, like, will you be my girlfriend? And she
Aw.
says really clearly, no.
Aw.
So I was like, fair enough. I wasn't really expecting a yes. I took a shot. So the next day, it's Valentine's Day, and her friends get word that I had asked her this. So they come up to me right at the end of recess and they say, guess what? Sarah changed her mind. She wants to be your girlfriend. So I spend the next like 3 hours of classes thinking I've got a girlfriend, right?
Ooh,
And then at the
juicy.
end of the day, when we're all going out to the bus, I run up to Sarah and she turns around and goes, I don't know what my friends told you, but I am not your girlfriend.
Oh my God, Sarah.
Sarah Velikan.
Is she on Facebook?
Ah,
Have you ever
the
looked?
fifth grader that got away. So,
You know you Facebooked her. What in like 2010 you have had to Facebook this Sarah girl. What's she up to? Do you know?
no, she got like right after high school. So she went to high school with me too, I think. No, I don't even remember. But the bottom line is, I think she got married like right out of high school and
So
had
you
some
never had a
kids.
chance with Sarah.
I think she lives in Danville or something. Exactly. It wasn't meant to be. But here's the point. Somewhere along the way, I started noticing, after those two incidents in a row, I just started noticing that I was having crappy days on February 14th, usually nothing to do with Valentine's Day. And I
Ah,
started to think I had a February 14th curse.
right.
And you broke my curse.
Oh, stop.
Well, it started to get better after you, and then since we got married, I haven't really noticed a bad day on the 14th, although like all of February
Mm,
sucks just because I have like, right, we have
no, for
winter
sure.
blues and stuff.
But I have to tell you, yeah, I think I remember you telling me about I remember our first Valentine's Day, you were really nervous because you were like trying to explain to me that it was a very dark time for you. And then I heard these childhood stories and I was like, that's adorable. How is this like this is what Ray considers dark? Like if only, right? If only I could have like problems of that magnitude. And so anyway, it was I thought it was really sweet and cute. And I remember just being like, "Oh, well, good news for you. Like, I'm not a Valentine's Day person. Like, it kind of gives me the ick. I hate going to a restaurant where like everyone around me is on a date. I've experienced Valentine's dates with like past boyfriends or lovers or whatever, and yeah, it's always super cringy. I've never liked it. So I think that's like my own trauma, right? Like my story is just that I never had a good Valentine's Day date that didn't make me want to like kind of like it's I'm just like embarrassed about myself. I'm like,
I think
ew.
I was like, when I first couple of years I was around you, I remember kind of being like, well, good because I literally, this is my one thing. I do not celebrate Valentine's. I started treating it like I was the kid in like Final Destination who like death's coming for him. So he goes in that cabin and he like safeguards everything and he's
Yeah.
just going to sit in the cabin. Like that's how I would always treat February 14th.
So then we
If it
just started a tradition of just doing like whatever we think is fun on Valentine's Day, but not around other people. So we usually kind of have like a party at our own house, basically. So we usually have like a lot of whiskey and watch a movie and maybe play something. And I feel like we usually just have a chill time, and we always get takeout. We usually get Chinese takeout.
yeah. And I hate, there's too many people that try to celebrate. So like Valentine's Day was supposed to be a romantic, like love holiday.
Well, it's
And
about
like,
Saint Valentine, right? Didn't it start as a religious thing, maybe?
it's such an inconsequential holiday that I don't even care to really like focus on the history. Who gives a shit? Isn't it really themed around like two people love each other romantically, you like celebrate together. Like
Totally.
I hate that all these other people want to get in on the mix, like mom, I love you. But like, and she's respected that I don't celebrate Valentine's Day for many years. But if I hadn't drawn that line, she'd be like calling me on Valentine's Day or sending me a Valentine's card, and it's like, guys, it's not. This is between you and the person you're dating, and that's it. You don't have to acknowledge it with anybody else. Just stop.
We al-
Everything is not Christmas.
we always acknowledged it in my family, and it was always just simply with giving each other chocolate. And I always thought that was really sweet. So you better buy me some
Your
chocolate. You got a few days.
son may or may not have purchased you chocolate. We'll see.
Oh, all right. Well, happy
find out.
Valentine's Day to everybody. We hope
Happy
you
Valentine's,
don't.
everyone.
Yeah, I hope you don't have an awful Valentine's Day date, even if it is with your boyfriend or husband, because yeah, that's so cringy. Anyway.
You know what's funny? Our guest today, Maria Chappelle-Nadal, called me a few weeks ago, and she was like, "Hey, I know you got that like Valentine's Day coming up with like the curse and everything. How are you doing with that?" And I was like, "Oh wow, I can't believe you remembered me mentioning." Like apparently I mentioned it a year ago or something to her while we were working on the podcast, and she like remembered it well enough to actually call with concern, see how I was doing, kind of thing. That's hilarious.
I
Thank
think
you, Maria.
I think anyone who knows you well finds it very difficult to ever see you like be harmed. So I think we should just go for it and introduce her.
Here's the interview, y'all. It's a great conversation. Hope you enjoy.
Are you guys here?
Pablo, I'm going to need you to stop that, please. Thank you.
It's not your fault, Pablo. It's the computer.
Can you hear us, Maria?
Yeah, I thought I lost you guys.
You did for a minute.
All right. Do you want to hit record and we'll get going?
It's been recording.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good. We'll include this in the podcast.
No.
I'll just let our audience in on the fact that we just spent like an hour and a half trying to get a mic and headphones to work. Which I always find is really conducive to like a relaxed, friendly, and enjoyable conversation.
I thought that it was because Mercury was in Mercury, but that's not why.
I'm relaxed.
That's good.
Pablo's
Pablo's happy.
relaxed.
So Maria, how are you doing today? The other day we got on the phone and like we congratulated each other because we are nominated for an NAACP Image Award. And so I take it this is your first? Haha.
This is my first nomination for an NAACP Image Award, and it feels fantastic. And this is like a moment of pride. I am so thankful to you and Duffy for bringing me in and, trusting me to be a part of the team. And I'm grateful to be in a space I never thought that I would be in.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're grateful back. I mean, right? Like we did take a little bit of a risk because you were like a media personality in the sense that you'd been a longtime successful politician and leader in Missouri, but you'd never been, officially an investigative journalist, a producer or podcast producer, or like a host or personality. So this is a pretty strong way to come out the gate.
Well, I will say I was a personality. I have a big old personality. But for all the other things, you're absolutely correct.
Well, okay. So, I mean, can you kind of tell our audience what your memory was of how like, I guess we first approached you to be involved with season 1, and then
You
what
were
you're-
nagging me. We were in the middle of COVID.
I was
And you kept
surprised you picked up and called me back because you were a state senator.
were.
And you had
No,
bigger
I
things
was in the
going
back in
on.
the house. I was back in
Oh,
the
you were back in the
house. It was that's right. COVID. It was during COVID. And I mean, COVID was huge and like no one knew how to respond. And I remember just sitting in my office, and there is a gentleman that both of us know, Harvey K. And he was like, well, you don't have to call back, but I know him and I've talked to him. And you just kept calling, just nagging me. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this, you know?
Why
And then,
did you not want to talk about it?
because I felt as though I would have to make a comment about whether Melissa's son, Danye Dion Jones, which is the subject matter of season 1, if I would have to say out loud whether, it was a homicide or if it was something else. And I didn't want to say that because there were so many people in the press who were pushing for me to say that it was a homicide, but I didn't know. So what we agreed to in the call, and I remember the day I had my lights on in my office and my dogs with me, but I remember saying I can help with procedures and protocols because I know procedures and protocols, and I know in government every entity has to have a set of procedures and a set of protocols, and that's what I agreed to. And so I couldn't make a determination because I wasn't the investigator on the crime scene. I wasn't there. I couldn't speak out of turn because I didn't know. What I did know is that we did have a series of mysterious deaths of frontline activists who were involved in Ferguson. That's what I did know.
You were the first to really call it out publicly, right? You went to the state Senate floor and gave that speech after Edward Crawford.
I did. And I mean, and Eddie is from the same area of town that I'm from, and so being close to a lot of the teachers and the educators in our area, they knew him. They knew all about him. And then when I tied that award-winning photo of Eddie Crawford, and the fact that he was from the neighborhood, and the fact that he was just involved in his own way in the Ferguson uprising, I was intrigued, but like I wanted to know the circumstances. I wanted to know, was this a setup? Was it what they said it was? What was it? And so I naturally had, and there were several of these cases of people who were prominent.
There have been people for about the last 8 years, I would say, who are not the people who would normally have wanted to run for office, but they're seeing what's going on and they think to themselves, well, maybe I got to do this. But they think, it's funny, right? The people who should be in power are the ones who are sort of least interested in it. And so I wonder what you could impart to them about when you were, was it 20? You were 29 when you first ran for Missouri House of Rep?
Yes, when I won, I was the age of Barbara Jordan.
And I mean, I can't imagine being in my late 20s and making like a real legitimate run and then actually managing to get into that kind of an office. So I don't know, for somebody who wants to run, what are they in for and what do they need to do? And then what do you remember about that first experience and that win?
Yeah, it was somebody who wants to run and feels like they don't have the financial support or the preceding reputation in politics.
How did you get it?
Being hungry. I knew that I wanted to be in public service my entire life. I knew that.
The first step one, like, what made you think you could? You've said you wanted to be in that role your whole young life, right? But then you're 29. What made you think you could win that time? And how did you win that time?
Walking doors. I lived in the neighborhood my entire life. born and raised, that's a big deal, being born and raised in one neighborhood. So I knew a lot of people. They knew me when I was a kid. I went to school with their children who were now adults, So people knew me from the neighborhood. They knew that I was already active being unelected. I was working for the lieutenant governor's office before I ran for office. And the reason why I was talking about the, I don't know if it was 5 or 7 part series about nursing homes in 2003 in the Post Dispatch is because, we needed the Post Dispatch and the other and all media to talk about the situation when it came to senior citizens in nursing homes in my neighborhood, at the nursing home where my great great aunt Lucille stayed, is where 4 women ended up dying because the nursing home refused to put on the air conditioning. And
Wow.
that became part of the 7 part series that was in the Post Dispatch. So it was very personal to me, one, because I had a family member there. And in our family, like many Latina families, we keep our seniors in our home until we can't take care of them any longer. That's what we did with my great grandmother. That's what we did with my great great aunts. In the room where I'm talking to you right now, is where my great great aunt Lucille was in her bed, and we were taking care of her until we could no longer take care of her anymore. And she went to that nursing home. So, getting to the point, like, people knew me as an advocate. The high school, it's all about high school. People knew me from where I went to school. So I had a lot of friends, the parents of people who I went to school with. They were like, I remember you, and so they called me by my nickname. And, it was just, people knew me in the neighborhood. I walked doors. I was hungry for it. And, one of the ways you raise money is by people who are in your inner circle, and then you branch out from there. But, it's really the power of the people who loved me and believed in me. That's why I was so gracious and so grateful when I won. And it was not an easy election in 2004, as we had the marriage amendment ban. And literally the district was, one side of it mostly white, the other side of it mostly black. And you had the black religious right who were at the polls saying that I was a sinner because I believed in same-sex marriage. So that election, even though I had worked my butt to the bone going door to door, multiple times in certain neighborhoods, I only won by 194 votes that time.
Wow.
And I worked really hard for it. But every time I ran for office, I had to work hard for it. It's nothing that's given. That's why, like, when I look at Wesley Bell, he didn't do what I had to do. He was bought and paid for.
And then, I mean, what was that feeling? Like you wanted it and you win the first time, and then is the feeling just woohoo, I won, or is it, oh God, now I gotta do this, like I gotta come through for my community, or I don't know.
It's shocking, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, how was it? I mean, what was it like walking in there and having to do the job?
Now I got to do the work. I was blessed that one of my mentors was the first female statewide office holder. She lived in my precinct. She was my mentor, Harriet Woods, and I was her last mentee. And so she poured all of her knowledge into me. And, people like you don't know these names, but, people locally would know these names, Sheila Lumpy and Barbara Frazier. These are people who did the job. They did the work. Margaret Donnelly, they were students of the law, students of statute. And that's what I modeled myself after, because I didn't want to just show up for work. I wanted to show my value. That was very, very important to me, was to show my value as a servant to the public. And that's what I did. It was selfless work. Every single day I woke up, I asked myself, how are you going to prove that you are worthy today, every day. And so for me, being an elected official means that you're giving yourself, and you're giving yourself, you're giving your time, you are learning, you are studying. I mean, my first filibuster in 2011, I studied for it for like 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Yeah. And nobody believed that I was going to do that filibuster because I'm a big old girl. But nobody believed that I was going to do that filibuster for 10 hours and 45 minutes. And I did. And I didn't just like read a book. I read from cases. You know, coincidentally, the issue was about work discrimination, which is one of the reasons why I take this pending lawsuit on age and sex discrimination very seriously. You know, as a senator, you know, I filibustered terrible legislation that undid like law all the way back to like 1965. I mean, all the good policies that were adopted from that point, they were trying to take away. And that was before I myself was discriminated against in the job that I had. We had 8 counts against them, 3 federal and 5 state. And a lot of it had to do with my First Amendment, but a lot of it had to do with discrimination. And luckily, you know, I was already at that point where, you know, I was taking notes and just keeping up with every single incident that occurred. And it was, you know, it's one thing to fight for others without the experience. It's another thing to fight for others with the experience.
Was there one moment that was the scariest or the most trying for you? Toughest?
Oh, death threats. All the death threats I got.
Was that around your Kathy Griffin moment?
No, it was way before that.
Okay.
It was way before that. I mean, standing up for immigrants, you know, I was getting death threats. I had someone outside my house with a rifle in his car. I just had come from Kansas City. I had crosshair stickers outside my office door. I had substances delivered to my office that we didn't know if it was rat poisoning or something else.
Wow.
So, I mean, literally, when I make a call to my local police, I have about 10 cars that show up still.
Well, maybe that's why people don't want to run for office, Ray. Maybe that's the answer. It's like yes, you want to do things for the community, but you have to be strong enough to put up with the side effects of it, like getting death threats and being poisoned.
That's Ruth, let me just say this. That's only when you have courage. Because the people who are like Wesley Bell, they don't have to deal with stuff like that. People who stand up and have a pair, they're the ones who go through those things. People who stand up for others who are the most vulnerable go through those experiences. But if you're just going with the flow and with the crowd, you don't have to worry about any of that.
So what made you want to participate in season 2?
You know what? I needed to do something different. I had a very, very rotten experience for the first time in public service. And I wanted to go into another direction. I had been told by my employer that I was not allowed to do any documentaries. I was not allowed to do any podcasts. I was not allowed to speak on my expertise as a former state senator. And I was in dismay. So when when this was mentioned as a possibility of something to do, I was like, I'm going to show them, you know, and 3 years later, look, we have our second nomination, NAACP Image Award nomination.
So you were censored as a senator, as a former?
No, I went from the Senate to the House, and then after I left the legislature, I worked for St. Louis County. And
the area that you would come to investigate. So that was
yes.
So it's almost a whistleblower.
Speaking of which, I helped write the ordinance for whistleblowing. So yes, and I carved out some of the infringements and federal violations within that ordinance that I was experiencing myself. But I felt as though this was like that moment to do something totally different and join the gig world. And that's what I did. And it was a transition because you have to be really, really flexible. And I didn't know everything in this world. And you and John and Mallory had to teach me a lot of the things. And my instinct also was a part of this because I am naturally inquisitive, which is a necessary skill set as a legislator, but it was quite useful in our 2.5-year journey trying to find out how Darren Seals, was murdered. You have certain experience. For 22 years, I was in public service. Working for the former lieutenant governor, working in St. Louis County, and then being elected for 16 years. And there are things that are normal when it comes to bureaucracy. And then there are things that, don't really make too much sense. And that's what I brought to the podcast.
Exactly. I was going to say, you gave us a compliment earlier where you kind of said that we taught you. I mean, we didn't have to teach you much. We were kind of like, here's basically how it works. And what you brought to it was essential, because we got by as outsiders in season 1, but to really get to the bottom of Darren Seals, like, you had to be connected and you had to be trusted by the world out there, and you certainly are. And so you were, anybody that needed to be talked to, you were able to go through that door, and that made all the difference. And I don't know if there was what you found to be what required the most adjustment for you, or the most struggle.
Ooh, the violence. So part of our, as one of the rabbit holes was getting to know the streets in a very intimate way. And when we were exploring the life of the rappers and the gang members, and going through not only their mugshots, but also their rap videos and their Facebook pages, there's so much violence. And I think at one point in time, if you remember, I started having nightmares because of all of the violence that I was seeing in my research and my discovery work.
We felt like we were counting bodies. I mean,
we were.
Yeah.
I mean, we were counting bodies. Like, what a thing to say or see or report. We were counting bodies. And, even in the music, I mean, there's some music that I just felt like I would feel any other rapper, but there's other music that was just dark. And it really reflects, and the police reports, that's the other thing. The police reports, when you combine the police reports with some of the rap songs and some of the pictures that you saw in social media, I mean, it does a job on you. And I was open with you guys about that.
You and I would both back and forth. I think we were both deeply troubled because yes, you would. It was the indiscriminate sometimes of the violence, or the lack of almost motive. It was like
it seems senseless.
Very senseless violence that certain peoples were very capable of, that we were sort of tracking the story of, and then knowing that we were kind of finding that some of these folks may have been involved in Darren Seals' murder, and having to get in touch with them and enter their world, bring them into our worlds, and you actually living out there. Highly unsettling, that combination.
I think it's safe to say that most violence is senseless.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a lot of it is.
Usually,
yeah,
right?
But I think the majority, that's what makes violence just so icky to witness or read about, because most of it is so unnecessary or senseless to the normal person, right? Who's not brainwashed into thinking that this is how justice is served over like something petty or stupid or trivial.
Maria and I, who are kind of a little bit of an odd couple, although I think we have a lot of commonalities, but
we're brother and sister. That's how we are.
Wonderful. I agree.
You always wanted a sister.
There's two. I have two memories of, like, there was the phone call we had after we confronted a particular party with the evidence that he was likely involved. That he knew more than he was saying about Darren Seals' murder, right? What do you remember about our call right after that?
Oh man, like we both paused.
Yeah.
Like we both, I'm going to reveal something, but I had to smoke a joint after that call.
I was pounding alcohol while I was talking with you.
I was so scared after that phone call. But here's the other thing. We were prepared.
Mm-hmm.
We were prepared. We read all the police reports. We knew the game, but we didn't talk to the person. So like talking to that person, already knowing their background, already knowing the crimes that they were suggested to be involved in, we threw them off their game for a second, but we were thrown off because it was just so real. Like when the one person said it's a dangerous game, like that.
Episode 8 of season 2, for those who are like, I want to go check this out. I'm very proud, by the way. I listened to that recently, and like, you're right, we were prepared. You could tell that we built up and built up, right? We got we knew how we might answer on this, that, and the other thing, and we could use that to go here and there, and we tag teamed it in a pretty interesting way. I thought it holds up.
Oh, we did really well, and that was totally off script. Like it wasn't even something that we said, well, you do this and you do that. It wasn't even like that. It was like there's certain aspects, like you had your own rabbit hole, I had mine. And we just took turns. We didn't say that we were going to take turns. It was just the void of the moment, and we filled in that void.
You guys became detectives and subpoenaed people.
Which is why he says to us at some point, like, you guys sound like cops.
Yeah, you were.
Which didn't sound like a compliment coming from this particular person.
Well, if the cops in Missouri would have done their job.
No, it's the prosecutor, Ruth. It's the prosecutor. The prosecutor did his job.
There you go. You go.
And I don't know how we have to say it, but I mean, I feel we got to those answers, right? People listen to episode 10. They listen to the whole season, but they get through episode 10. And I think they're going to feel they understand within a reasonable certainty who was the trigger man, who were the accomplices, who likely ordered it, and what the possible motivations were, which was not something that existed 2 years before when we started this process, right?
That's exactly right.
Now, here's what, if we're going to talk about spilling the tea and then sipping it, I have been always triggered and bothered by the fact that this podcast, including season 1 and 2, the After the Uprising podcast, has revealed so much and has done such amazing investigative work. And yet St. Louis / the media of St. Louis has completely muffled it. And I just want to know.
Now, you don't have any thoughts on that, do you, Maria?
Do you happen to have any thoughts on that? Because
first of all, it is incredible news. And as someone who, I take pride in, when I was 5 years old, I voted for Jimmy Carter at my elementary school, So I've always watched the news. I've always read the news. It's the first thing that I do in the morning. It's the last thing I do at night. And the work that we did was stellar. I mean, it's stuff that I don't see, quite frankly, often. I think the last time I saw something that really delved into an issue was a 7-part series in the Post-Dispatch dealing with nursing homes and how they have failed those who are most vulnerable, the residents in nursing homes. And I think in 1988, they did also a series on radioactive waste and how the processing of uranium made a lot of people ill. Those are two, areas. And I think also the Monsanto explosion. Those are stories that stood out historically for me when it comes at least to the Post-Dispatch. And then we had something called the Riverfront Times, where they have done incredible reporting. And I mean, for like 30 years, they've done incredible reporting. And part of the information we got, came from some of these sources. But when it came to our story, who done it?
Mm-hmm.
Who done it?
Right.
Not even the black paper. That's what I was so amazed by. Not even the black paper picked it up, and Indiana's black paper, Indianapolis's black paper picked it up.
Right. The Indian Reporter.
Yeah.
Even when Duffy and I wrote that letter to the editor, that never even showed up.
Yeah.
That never even showed up.
That is so weird.
Well, this half free, half slave state. And it goes back to why Ferguson even happened, the uprising. And it's because people like to stay silent, I guess. I mean, some people were suggesting maybe it's because it was iHeart and it's a competing entity. But you would think that some paper would cover this. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and I just feel blackballed, honestly. I think that the work that we did, because maybe they didn't do it.
Right.
I don't know what the issue is. I just know I feel as though our story, which was well done, well researched, and by the way, we have multiple stories that we can talk about that we didn't get to talk about in what we, achieved in 10 episodes. Those are great stories, but without having a conversation with people who delved into why did one of these deaths happen? Do you care that the prosecutor, Wesley Bell, didn't give a damn?
Well, because Duffy will kill me if we reveal too much about what we found. But basically, one of the findings was that everything we found about who was involved in Darren Seals' murder, it turns out the cops found out too, and they told the prosecutor's office right at the time when Wesley Bell was transferring into that office. So he had a long time in which he could have gone after the shooter. They even arrest us, like a SWAT team essentially came and held the shooter for like 3 days in the Justice Center.
Oh, wow.
Lets him out. And so there's this whole question about why there was never a prosecution for him, any of the accomplices involved in the destruction of a body, and not to mention the person who possibly ordered it. And so what's really amazing is that they don't cover this when not only do we find that, but at that time he's running for U.S. Congress, a position that he was just sworn in, this week into, right?
My thing is, what does a black man running for these kinds of positions have to lose by hindering this kind of information?
Nothing.
And right. And so why then? You know what I mean? Like, you just got to keep asking
So why
why.
then?
I mean, I've always thought, working in St. Louis County government and having to keep track of the budget for all of the departments and reviewing every single presentation from that office, I would just say he's lazy. And he is. And
But
he
really,
is.
You're too lazy to protect Black Lives Matter, to continue a movement, to find justice for innocent people, to put the right people in jail. Finally, something that the system often does not.
He was taking pictures. He was Ray will tell you, we have found multiple occasions where murderers were let out of jail, failure to prosecute, and then went out and killed again.
Oh my God.
I would even venture to say that some of the murders that we've had in the last 5 years since he's been prosecuting attorney were people who were under the authority of St. Louis County Justice Center.
And so as we're finding all this at the tail end of production for season 2, Wesley is running for U.S. Congress against Cori Bush, and you decided what? You felt compelled by what you were seeing regarding Bell and the potential
failure. And I said, well, I'm going to run for office. And I knew that it was a long shot. You know, usually you prepare for these things in advance, you have money up front, and people know what you're about to do, you know. And I needed to be the loyal opposition because I dreamt about being in government when I was a little kid. Okay. This is like what I knew that I would want to do. When I was in college, all I knew is that here's what I knew. I wanted to help educate people of color on the issues so that they can be better educated and vote according to what they know. We are at a point today where the electorate is not as educated on these issues. So case in point is, you know, this sex discrimination, age discrimination lawsuit that may be in the talks of a settlement, according to the Post-Dispatch. So, you know, I really feel, and I wish that there was somebody who could tell me in the press, the local press, why they didn't want to cover it. I wish there was someone who would just, even off the record, would say, here's why we didn't cover it. The closest thing that we got to is Ryan Krull. And I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but you know, because we don't have the Riverfront Times anymore, he went to St. Louis Magazine. He's an incredible reporter. He is one of the entities who wrote about that 900-page FBI surveillance report on Darren Seals. And so he's one of those people I watch, but that was in the last 2 months, I believe.
Right.
You know, we released our podcast in, what was it, June 11th of last year?
Right.
Well, I'm not much of a conspiracist, but my gut instinct tells me that there's something sinister, something dark, and some people, not even a person, but an organization that maybe that they're even afraid to put out there, basically holding people like Bell and maybe even journalists in fear, basically being like, hey, do you like having all of your fingers? You know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it, but it sounds almost like a weird mafia gang thing behind the suppression of it, because those are the only people who would benefit from oppressing this.
Well, you know what? I think it's the political elite. I think it's the wealthy masters of Wesley Bell who have dictated his journey, and he loves it, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons I even suspect, I don't know this, but in our investigatory work, I even suspect that he made deals with defense attorneys and decided not to prosecute. It's, you know, certain cases because of contributions. I mean, we tracked that. I think it's very possible that while he was running for Congress, you know, he was pulling on the strings of people who had to rely on the prosecutor's office in multiple cases. So, you know, I don't think he's a kosher guy at all.
Not. No, I think he did it. I think he knew that if he or certain people knew that if they allowed coverage of this podcast, it would unearth themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that there's still a possibility.
You know what I don't get? I just don't get how communities, especially like people of color, right? And me being a Latina myself, this makes me so angry. When it is to someone like me so obvious that the person at the forefront doesn't give a damn about things that are worth fighting for and protecting in your community, and then they vote for them anyway. You know, or they help, or they do certain things or actions that help these people get ahead, maybe by not getting involved or not saying anything or whatever. I just cannot wrap my head around that kind of corruption and self-sabotage from an entire community that not very long ago was the epicenter of a very important movement in modern history. Well, I wanted to ask you, have you considered mentoring any current candidates or inspiring women out there?
You know what? I did for a long time. Usually you do that when you're elected. I will tell you that things have changed to a certain degree. We had the Sushir Institute, which was for specifically women, and I oftentimes would go to their training seminars to help educate people who wanted to get involved either in the background or as candidates. And I would tell them how I did it, how I achieved this goal of being an elected person. And I'm in a different place in my life. I feel as though when I'm fighting sex discrimination, I'm standing up for women. When I am fighting for the First Amendment, I am standing up for women. So I have evolved into a different space where, I want to feed my soul and I want to continue to leave a legacy. And I think part of that legacy is the amazing work that we did on After the Uprising season 2.
This is a leading question, but you mentioned it with such pride. Are you basically as proud of the work that we did on season 2 as anything that happened in your 16 years in office? Or I don't know. What are you most proud of over your career?
I had to work my ass off in the legislature, and I had to work my ass off on this podcast. It was nothing that was given.
Yeah.
Because of how we worked was, product proven. I mean, we had to bring our product to the table. We met every single week, and we had to talk about which rabbit hole we were going down that week, and then compare notes and then follow up, in areas that we thought were significant. So, I enjoyed the work. It was meaningful. It was public service in a different way. And that's the bottom line is that it was public service in a different way.
I've been pretty lost for the last couple of months because I don't know how do you go forward, and how do you have any hope or optimism in a world in which someone who acts the way Donald Trump has acted for 8 years gets elected again? What are we supposed to do here?
You mean, how do you stay motivated in a place that
I feel all of the air going out of my fight. If we couldn't beat this guy after 24 felony counts and a coup,
34.
Now he's going to be the most powerful man on earth for 4 years to life, then how am I supposed to think I can win anything ever? Why am I going to fight?
I'm just telling you, I'm focusing on Hounding Clayton.
Okay.
And I have taken a vow I'm not going to deal with this man.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to deal with him. I'm going to try my best not to deal with him.
Yeah.
I've been good so far. But I just really think that there should be a certain kind of coverage of local politics, because there's so many people who are inept, who are elected right now, who are not doing the due diligence that's required by the people, that the people deserve. They're not getting that. And so I in a different way, want to be an instigator. I want to make elected officials think more strategically when it comes to serving the most vulnerable in society. And here's the thing. I was in that position of making decisions for 22 years. So I'm one of the best people to do it, at least in my hometown. So that's where I'm focusing. I'm until I get to the point where I need to address, I feel the need to address, 47, then I will. But I'm not, wanting to put my energy there because I saw that it got me nowhere.
So you've segued into what I think could be a good closer for this, which is, what is Hounding Clayton? Can you tell us about that and what you're trying to do there?
So it stemmed out of all of everything that we've been talking about. Is how the seat of government in St. Louis County has failed so many people, whether it's the county council or whether it's the county executive or Wesley Bell, who is a prosecutor who let murderers out on the street, slept with his staffers, has had multiple sex discrimination lawsuits and wrongful termination lawsuits. I mean, my goodness. I feel the need to address the seat of government which is Clayton, Missouri. And so that's why it's called Hounding Clayton.
And so this is a podcast that you're starting?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. There's so much technology that's involved, and Ray knows that I'm not the technology person on our team. So everything that I've done on my own, and it's one step at a time. I don't pretend for a second to be brilliant at what I'm doing on my own, but I want to have a voice. And if there are some people who would want to listen in, so be it. If there's some people who just don't want to listen to me, I don't care. I've been through the fire multiple times. As I've said to people, I've been to hell and back a few times, so not too much bothers me.
So where can people find you, Maria? Where can people listen to or follow Hounding Clayton?
Hounding Clayton can be found on YouTube, Blue Sky, X, TikTok while it lasts, Instagram, and probably some other places I can't remember right now, but the handle is Hounding Clayton.
That's where you can follow Maria until hopefully you hear After the Uprising season 3, maybe in about a year or so. Who knows?
You never know. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your time, and it's been a really fascinating journey to watch you both work together.
We didn't even get to talk about the settlement.
Well, that's going to have to be a follow-up episode, maybe.
Yeah, that's a follow-up episode, but I'm going to leave it up here.
Settlement pending and discrimination lawsuit involving Wesley Bell. Well, you know what? They're going to have to go to Hounding Clayton to hear your update on that.
Yes.
They're going to have to go to Hounding. And I mentioned in the article. Yeah. So that's awesome.
You're mentioned in the article.
Yeah, I can't believe that our podcast is never mentioned, but I am mentioned in this article.
They won't mention.
Well, it is always a joy to talk to y'all, and thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Oh yeah, let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Everybody Has a Podcast is a production of True Stories. Visit truestories.us for more. Follow me on Instagram at Ruth Vaca and at Veganish Vegetarian. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and give us an awesome review. Everybody Has a Podcast is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. You have to encourage people.
Copyright 2024 True Stories, Inc.